The darkness had swallowed Olivia Harper whole for what felt like an eternity, and by the third morning trapped in that God-forsaken root cellar, she had almost convinced herself that death might come as a mercy. Her throat burned from screaming until her voice cracked into nothing more than ragged whispers. Her fingers bloodied from clawing at the wooden door that refused to budge, and her body trembled from cold and hunger in equal measure. She pressed her ear against the rough planks one more time, listening for any sound from the world above, but heard only the oppressive silence that had become her companion in this underground tomb. North Platte, Nebraska had seemed like a fresh start when Olivia arrived 3 months earlier in the spring of 1878, fleeing the suffocating expectations of her aunt's Boston household. At 22 years old, she had inherited a small sum from her deceased mother, enough to purchase the modest general store on the edge of town from old Mr. Hendricks, who was moving west to live with his daughter in California. The townspeople had been wary at first of a young, unmarried woman running a business alone, but Olivia had a head for numbers and a warm smile that eventually won over even the most skeptical customers. She had been happy, truly happy, for the first time since her parents died when she was 16. Then Vernon Cutler started coming around. He was the foreman at the largest ranch outside town, a position that gave him authority over 24 ranch hands and an inflated sense of his own importance. Vernon was 35, broad-shouldered and handsome in a rough way, but there was something in his pale blue eyes that made Olivia uncomfortable from their first meeting. He would linger in her store, making conversation that started friendly but always turned possessive, asking why a pretty thing like her was wasting away behind a counter when she could be properly taken care of. Olivia had politely declined his dinner invitations twice before he stopped asking and started demanding. Last week, he had cornered her after closing time, his breath heavy with whiskey, telling her that she needed to understand her place. When she threatened to fetch the sheriff, Vernon had laughed, reminding her that Sheriff Paulson was his cousin and that nobody in North Platte would take her side over his. She had managed to push past him and lock herself inside her living quarters above the store, but the fear had settled deep in her bones. 3 days ago, she had been restocking supplies in the root cellar behind her store, a deep rectangular space dug into the earth with sturdy wooden shelves lining the walls, when she heard footsteps on the stairs. Before she could turn around, the door slammed shut above her. She rushed up the wooden steps, pushing against the door with all her strength, but it would not move. Something heavy had been placed against it from the outside. Vernon's voice had filtered through the cracks. "You need time to think about my offer, Miss Harper. A few days down there might help you see reason. A woman alone cannot survive out here without a man's protection. I will come back when you are ready to be sensible." She had screamed herself hoarse that first day, pounding on the door until her hands were bruised and swollen. The cellar held enough provisions that she would not starve immediately. Jars of preserved vegetables and fruits, sacks of potatoes and onions, but the temperature underground was brutally cold, and she had only the thin cotton dress she had been wearing when Vernon trapped her. She wrapped herself in empty burlap sacks and huddled in the corner, rationing the food and water she found stored there, trying to conserve her strength. By the second day, the cold had seeped into her very bones, and she developed a cough that rattled in her chest. She tried to keep track of time by the thin slivers of light that crept through the gaps in the door frame, but underground, time became elastic and strange. She thought of her mother, who had been strong and brave until the fever took her, and tried to summon that same strength. She would not let Vernon Cutler break her. Now, on the morning of the third day, Olivia felt her resolve beginning to crack along with her body. She was so cold that she could barely feel her feet, and hunger gnawed at her stomach despite the food surrounding her. The preserved goods were sealed tight, and in her weakened state, she lacked the strength to open the jars. She had managed to eat a raw potato yesterday, but it had made her stomach cramp painfully. What frightened her most was the way her thoughts had started to drift, becoming hazy and disconnected. She knew these were signs of her body beginning to fail. She forced herself to stand on shaking legs and climb the stairs one more time, gathering what little strength remained. She would not die down here. She would not give Vernon that satisfaction. With both fists, she hammered against the door, the sound barely more than a weak tapping, but it was all she had left. That was when she heard it. Hoofbeats. Multiple horses approaching at a gallop, then stopping somewhere nearby. Male voices calling to each other, though she could not make out the words. She tried to scream, but only a hoarse croak emerged from her damaged throat. She pounded harder, tears streaming down her dirt-streaked face. "Help," she managed to rasp. "Please, someone help me." The voices grew closer. She heard boots on the ground, heavy footsteps approaching the cellar door. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. What if it was Vernon returning? What if he had brought others? But she was beyond caring about consequences. Anything was better than dying alone in the dark. "You hear that?" A male voice, unfamiliar, with a slight drawl that marked him as someone who had spent time in Texas. "Sounds like it's coming from underground." "There's something blocking this door," another voice responded. "Heavy crate. Why would someone bar a root cellar from the outside?" "Unless something's locked inside that someone did not want getting out," a third voice suggested. "Could be dangerous." "Or could be someone needs help," the first voice countered firmly. "Stand back." Olivia heard scraping sounds as the heavy object blocking the door was shoved aside. Then the door itself rattled as someone pulled at it. The old hinges groaned in protest. "Doors locked from outside too," the first voice said. "This was deliberate. Stand clear." A moment of silence, then an explosive crash as a boot connected with the door. The wood splintered but held. Another kick, then another. Olivia backed down the stairs, hope and terror warring in her chest. On the fourth impact, the lock gave way and the door flew open, flooding the cellar with brilliant afternoon sunlight that blinded her after 3 days in darkness. She threw her arm across her eyes, stumbling backward. Her legs gave out and she started to fall, but strong hands caught her before she hit the ground. She was pulled against a solid chest, arms wrapping around her with surprising gentleness despite their obvious strength. "I have got you," the voice from before said softly near her ear. "You are safe now. I have got you." Olivia could not see his face through the brightness and her tears, but she felt the steadiness of him, the warmth seeping through his shirt into her frozen body. She clutched at his vest with trembling fingers, and then everything went dark as consciousness slipped away. She woke to the sensation of movement, being carried in strong arms while voices spoke urgently around her. She forced her eyes open, squinting against the light, and finally saw the face of the man holding her. He was perhaps 25 or 26, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly where it touched his collar. His face was all hard angles and planes, weather-worn and undeniably handsome, with a strong jaw and straight nose. But it was his eyes that caught her, a deep, warm brown that looked down at her with unmistakable concern. "Doc Miller's place is 3 streets over," one of his companions was saying. "We should get her there fast. She looks half frozen." "No," Olivia managed to croak out. The man carrying her looked down at her immediately. "My store, upstairs, please." "You need a doctor," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "I need my home," she insisted, though speaking cost her dearly. Please, I can explain. Something in her eyes must have convinced him because he nodded. Where? Harper's General Store, she whispered. 2 streets east. He adjusted his hold on her, cradling her more securely against his chest, and started walking with long, purposeful strides. His 2 companions flanked him, both eyeing her with curious concern. Olivia let her head rest against his shoulder, too exhausted to maintain her pride. She could feel his heartbeat, strong and steady beneath her ear, and for the first time in 3 days, she felt the terrible knot of fear in her chest begin to loosen. They reached her store quickly, and the man carrying her pushed through the door, causing the bell above to jingle. The few customers inside looked up in shock at the sight of the bedraggled woman being carried by the stranger. "Miss Harper," Mrs. Brennan gasped, dropping the bolt of fabric she had been examining. "What on earth happened?" "Upstairs," Olivia whispered, not wanting to explain in front of an audience. The man seemed to understand. He found the door leading to her private quarters and climbed the narrow stairs with surprising ease given his burden. She directed him to her small bedroom, and he laid her carefully on the bed, propping pillows behind her with an attentiveness that surprised her. "Water," one of his friends said, having followed them up. "She needs water and warmth." "And we need to know who locked her in that cellar," the other added darkly. "Because when we find them, there will be hell to pay." The man who had carried her sat on the edge of her bed, studying her face with those penetrating brown eyes. "Can you tell us what happened? Who did this to you?" Olivia opened her mouth, then hesitated. Vernon's warning echoed in her mind. Nobody would take her side. Sheriff Paulson was his cousin. But as she looked at the 3 strangers who had saved her life, she saw something in their faces that gave her courage. These were not men who would tolerate what had been done to her. "Vernon Cutler," she said, her damaged voice barely above a whisper. "He is the foreman at the Brickman Ranch. He has been pursuing me, and when I refused his advances, he locked me down there. Said I needed time to think about accepting his protection." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. The man sitting beside her went very still, his jaw tightening until a muscle jumped in his cheek. His 2 companions exchanged dark looks. "Matthew Steele," he said quietly, holding her gaze. "These are my brothers, Lucas and Thomas. We have been riding for 6 days from our ranch in southern Wyoming, passing through on our way to check on a herd we sold to a rancher east of here. Finding you was Providence, Miss Harper. Now, with your permission, I would like to have a conversation with Vernon Cutler." "His cousin is the sheriff," Olivia said weakly. "Vernon told me nobody would take my side." Matthew's expression hardened further. "I am not from North Platte, which means I do not give a damn whose cousin he is. What he did to you is attempted murder. If we had arrived even a day later, you might have died in that cellar." Thomas, the youngest looking of the 3 brothers, moved to the window. "Lucas, go fetch the doctor. Make sure he's actually coming and not just promising to. I will stay here with Matthew and Miss Harper." Lucas nodded and disappeared down the stairs. Olivia heard the store bell jingle as he left. She tried to push herself up to sitting but found she lacked the strength. Matthew immediately reached out to help her, his hands gentle but impersonal as he adjusted the pillows. "You should rest," he said. "Let the doctor examine you. We will handle Cutler." "I want to be there," Olivia said stubbornly. "When you confront him, he thought he could break me. I want him to see that he failed." Matthew studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "After the doctor clears you and you have rested, not before." "Agreed." She wanted to argue but knew he was right. She could barely sit up, let alone confront Vernon. "Agreed," she whispered. Thomas brought her water, and she drank greedily, the cool liquid soothing her ravaged throat. Matthew disappeared and returned with blankets from the linen chest. tucking them around her with a care that made her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. These strangers were showing her more kindness than anyone in North Platte had in months. "Why are you helping me?" she asked as Matthew settled back into the chair beside her bed. "You do not know me. This is not your fight." His brown eyes met hers steadily. "Any decent man would help someone in your situation. The fact that you even have to ask that question tells me this town has failed you badly." Before she could respond, they heard footsteps on the stairs. Lucas returned with an elderly man carrying a medical bag. Dr. Miller had treated Olivia once before for a winter cold, and his weathered face creased with concern as he approached the bed. "Miss Harper, these men said you were trapped in a cellar. Let me examine you." The Steele brothers stepped out to give her privacy, though Matthew hesitated at the door, looking back at her as though reluctant to leave. Olivia managed a small nod of reassurance, and he finally left, closing the door behind him. Dr. Miller's examination was thorough but gentle. He listened to her chest, making concerned noises about the rattle in her lungs. He checked her hands, applying salve to the torn skin and wrapping them in clean bandages. He gave her a tonic for her throat and another for the early stages of lung fever he detected. "You were fortunate they found you when they did," he said gravely. "Another day and the fever might have taken hold beyond my ability to treat it. As it is, you need warmth, rest, food, and time. I will return tomorrow to check on you." "Dr. Miller," Olivia said as he packed his bag, "if anyone asks, would you be willing to testify to my condition, to what was done to me?" The old doctor paused, then nodded slowly. "Vernon Cutler did this." "Yes." His mouth pressed into a thin line. "That man has caused trouble before, but his cousin always smooths things over." "I will testify, Miss Harper. Gladly. What he did to you is beyond anything that can be overlooked." After the doctor left, the Steele brothers returned. Matthew carried a tray with hot soup and bread, which he must have convinced someone downstairs to prepare. He sat beside her again while she ate slowly, her stomach protesting at first but then accepting the nourishment gratefully. "The doctor says you need rest," Matthew said. "We will stay in town tonight. Tomorrow, when you are stronger, we will deal with Cutler." "You do not have to stay," Olivia protested, though the thought of facing this alone made her chest tighten with anxiety. "You said you were passing through. I have already delayed you." "We are staying," he said firmly, "and it is not up for discussion." Something in his tone made her look up sharply. He was watching her with an intensity that made heat rise in her cheeks, despite her weakened state. There was something in his eyes that went beyond the concern of one stranger for another, something deeper that made her pulse quicken. Thomas cleared his throat from the doorway. "Lucas and I will get rooms at the hotel and see to the horses. Matthew, you staying here." "Someone should stay with Miss Harper," Matthew said, not taking his eyes off Olivia, "in case Cutler comes back." Olivia knew she should protest, that it was improper for a man to stay in her quarters overnight, but the truth was she felt safer with him there than she had felt in weeks. She nodded slightly, and Thomas grinned. "Thought you might say that. We will check in later." After his brothers left, an awkward silence fell. Matthew stood and moved to the window, looking out at the street below. Olivia finished her soup, feeling warmth and strength slowly seeping back into her body. She studied him in profile, noting the strong lines of his face, the breadth of his shoulders, the easy way he carried himself that spoke of confidence earned rather than assumed. "Tell me about your ranch in Wyoming," she said softly. "What is it like?" He glanced back at her, seeming surprised by the question, then moved to sit in the chair beside her bed again. "It is beautiful country, rolling grassland that turns gold in summer, with the mountains visible to the west. We run about 1,500 head of cattle." My father started it 20 years ago, and when he died 3 years back, my brothers and I took it over together. It sounds peaceful. It can be. It is also hard work, long days and harsh winters, but it is ours, and there is something satisfying about building something with your own hands. He paused. What brought you to North Platte? Olivia found herself telling him about Boston, about her parents' death, about her suffocating aunt who had wanted to marry her off to a wealthy banker twice her age. She told him about using her inheritance to buy the store, about the satisfaction of running her own business, about feeling free for the first time in her life. And she told him about Vernon, about the growing fear that had poisoned her fresh start. Matthew listened without interrupting, his expression growing darker as she described Vernon's escalating harassment. When she finished, he reached out and took her bandaged hand carefully in his. "You will never have to fear him again," he said quietly. "I give you my word." The simple declaration, spoken with such conviction, made tears spring to her eyes. She had been alone for so long, carrying the weight of her fear in silence, and having someone promise to stand with her was almost overwhelming. "Why do you care so much?" she whispered. "You do not even know me." Matthew was quiet for a long moment, his thumb brushing gently over her knuckles. "My mother died when I was 12, he finally said. A man in town, someone with power and influence, had made her life difficult with his unwanted attention. My father stood up for her, but the damage was done. The stress and fear contributed to her taking ill that winter. She never recovered." He met her eyes. "I swore then that I would never stand by while someone used their power to terrorize someone weaker. What Cutler did to you, leaving you to die in that darkness, it is unforgivable." Olivia felt her throat tighten with emotion. "I am sorry about your mother. And I am sorry that no one here protected you the way they should have." He squeezed her hand gently, then released it and stood. "You should rest now. I will be right outside your door. If you need anything, just call." She wanted to ask him to stay, to keep talking, but exhaustion was pulling at her now that her immediate needs were met. She nodded and let her eyes drift closed, feeling safer than she had in months with Matthew Steele standing guard. She woke several times during the night, surfacing from fever dreams where she was trapped in the dark again. Each time, Matthew was there, offering water and cool cloths for her forehead, speaking in low, soothing tones until she drifted back to sleep. By morning, the fever had broken, and she woke to sunlight streaming through her window and the smell of coffee. Matthew sat in the chair beside her bed, his clothes rumpled from sleeping in them, stubble darkening his jaw. He looked tired but alert, and when he saw her eyes open, he smiled. That smile transformed his serious face, making him look younger and devastatingly handsome. "Good morning," he said. "How are you feeling?" Olivia took inventory. Her throat still hurt, but less than before. Her hands throbbed under the bandages and her body ached from the ordeal, but her mind felt clear for the first time in days. "Better, stronger. Good. Dr. Miller will be here soon to check on you. My brothers are bringing breakfast." He stood and stretched, his shirt pulling tight across his shoulders. "Then, if you are up to it, we will pay a visit to Vernon Cutler." A tremor of fear ran through her, but she pushed it down. She would not cower anymore. "I am ready." Lucas and Thomas arrived with enough food to feed a small army. They had clearly charmed the hotel cook, because the spread included eggs, bacon, biscuits with gravy, and fresh fruit. Olivia ate more than she had in days, feeling her strength returning with each bite. Dr. Miller arrived as they were finishing breakfast and pronounced himself satisfied with her recovery, though he cautioned her to take it easy for a few more days. After he left, Olivia insisted on getting dressed properly. She chose her most severe dress, a navy blue with a high collar and long sleeves, and pinned her dark blonde hair up in a neat bun. When she emerged from her bedroom, Matthew's eyes swept over her approvingly. "You look ready to face down the devil himself," he said. "That is more or less what I am doing," she replied, managing a small smile despite her nervousness. They walked through town together, the three Steele brothers flanking Olivia like protective sentinels. People stared as they passed, word having clearly spread about her rescue. Some faces showed sympathy, others curiosity, and a few showed disapproval at a proper lady walking surrounded by strange men. Olivia kept her head high, refusing to show shame for something that had been done to her. The Brickman Ranch was a 20-minute ride outside town, but Vernon Cutler maintained a room above the saloon for nights when he stayed in North Platte. They found him there, sitting at a back table playing cards with two other men. He looked up as they entered and his eyes widened when he saw Olivia. "Miss Harper," he said, standing quickly. His surprise was genuine. "I was just about to come check on you. I heard you had taken ill." "You heard wrong," Matthew said coldly, stepping forward. "She was not ill. She was locked in her root cellar for 3 days. But you already knew that, since you were the one who put her there." Vernon's expression shifted from surprise to anger. "I do not know who you are, stranger, but you should watch your mouth. Making accusations like that could get a man hurt." "My name is Matthew Steele, and you are welcome to try hurting me. But first, you are going to answer for what you did to Miss Harper." The saloon had gone quiet, all eyes on their confrontation. Vernon glanced around, clearly aware of the audience. "I do not know what lies she has been telling you, but I have never touched her. I am a respected foreman. She is just an unmarried woman running a shop, probably desperate for a man's attention and angry that I refused her advances." Olivia felt rage surge through her at his blatant lies. She stepped forward, her voice ringing clear despite the rasp. "You locked me in that cellar after I refused your dinner invitation for the 3rd time. You said I needed time to think about accepting your protection. You told me no one would believe me because your cousin is the sheriff." Vernon's face darkened. "That is a damned lie. Sheriff Paulson, tell them. Would I do something like that?" Olivia had not noticed Sheriff Paulson standing at the bar, but he stepped forward now. He was a heavy-set man in his 50s with a face that suggested he had given up on justice somewhere along the way. "Now, Miss Harper, that is a serious accusation. You have any proof of this?" "The door was barred and locked from the outside," Matthew said. "Someone deliberately trapped her down there. Dr. Miller can testify to her condition when we found her. 3 days without proper food or water, early-stage lung fever from the cold. If we had not found her when we did, she would have died." "That does not prove Vernon did it," Sheriff Paulson said dismissively. "Could have been anyone, could have been an accident." "An accident?" Thomas spoke up incredulously. "Someone accidentally barred and locked a cellar door from the outside while she was down there." "Mistakes happen," the sheriff said. "I think you strangers should move along and stop causing trouble in my town." Matthew's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Your town has a problem with letting men terrorize women, Sheriff. That makes it everyone's problem." Vernon's face twisted into something ugly. "You are starting to annoy me, Steele. Maybe you should listen to the sheriff and ride on before something unfortunate happens to you and your brothers." "Is that a threat?" Lucas asked, his hand moving to rest on his pistol. The tension in the room ratcheted up dangerously. Several of the men at nearby tables stood, hands moving to their own weapons. Olivia felt her heart hammering, fearing this would end in bloodshed. "Enough," she said loudly. Every eye turned to her. She looked directly at Vernon, channeling all her fear and anger into courage. "I am not the first woman you have harassed, Vernon. Mary Thompson left town last year after you would not leave her alone. Sarah Mitchell married the first man who asked her just to escape your attention. How many others have been too afraid to speak up? Vernon took a step toward her, his face flushed with rage. You should watch that mouth of yours, woman. You do not know what you are talking about. Matthew moved between them so fast Olivia barely saw him shift. You take one more step toward her and it will be the last thing you do. Matthew, Olivia said softly, touching his arm. She could feel the tension thrumming through him. He is not worth it. She is right, Vernon said with a nasty smile. I am not worth the trouble you would bring on yourselves. This is my town. These are my people. You are just passing through. How long can you really stay to protect her? The question hung in the air. Matthew glanced back at Olivia and she saw the frustration in his eyes. Vernon was right. The Steele brothers had their own ranch to run. They could not stay in North Platte indefinitely to guard her. Then she will leave with us, Matthew said. The words sent shock through the room, but none more than through Olivia herself. She stared at him, wondering if she had heard correctly. What? Vernon sputtered. Miss Harper will return to Wyoming with us, Matthew continued, his voice steady and sure. She can run a store there just as easily as here, and she will be beyond your reach permanently. Olivia felt torn between gratitude and uncertainty. Leave North Platte. Abandon the store she had worked so hard to establish. But what was the alternative? Stay here and live in fear, waiting for Vernon to make another attempt. You cannot just take her, Sheriff Paulson protested weakly. I am not taking her. I am offering her a choice. Matthew turned to face Olivia fully. Come with us. Start fresh where men like Cutler have no power over you. I give you my word that you will be safe. Olivia looked into his eyes and saw nothing but sincerity. In the days she had known him, he had shown her more respect and protection than anyone in North Platte had in months. The decision crystallized with sudden clarity. Yes, she said, I will go with you. Vernon's face went purple with rage. The hell you will. You think you can just walk away from me? You think I will let some stranger take what is mine? She was never yours, Matthew said coldly, and she never will be. Vernon reached for his gun, but he was too slow. Matthew's pistol was out and aimed at Vernon's chest before the other man's weapon cleared its holster. The sound of hammers being cocked echoed through the saloon as Lucas and Thomas drew their own weapons, covering the other men in the room. Do not, Matthew said quietly. Whatever you think you can do, whatever protection you think your cousin provides, I promise you it is not enough. Touch your gun again and I will kill you where you stand. Sheriff Paulson stepped forward, hands raised. Now let us all just calm down. No need for anyone to die today. Then arrest Vernon Cutler for attempted murder, Matthew said without lowering his weapon. Let a judge decide his guilt. I do not have enough evidence for that, Paulson protested. Then we are leaving. Miss Harper is coming with us, and if anyone follows us or causes her any more trouble, they will answer to me. That clear enough. No one moved. The silence stretched out, taut as a wire. Finally, Vernon stepped back, his hands moving away from his gun. This is not over, Steele. Yes, it is, Matthew said. If I ever see you near Miss Harper again, for any reason, I will not be as generous as I am being today. That is not a threat. It is a promise. He holstered his weapon smoothly, and his brothers did the same. Matthew held out his hand to Olivia, and she took it without hesitation. Together, they walked out of the saloon and into the bright morning sunlight. The journey back to her store passed in a blur. Olivia's mind raced with the implications of what had just happened. She was leaving North Platte, leaving everything she had built, to travel to Wyoming with 3 men she barely knew. It was insane. It was dangerous. It was possibly the most reckless decision of her life. It was also the only choice that made sense. Back at her store, Matthew and his brothers helped her pack her belongings and inventory what could be taken and what would need to be sold. Thomas proved surprisingly knowledgeable about business, helping her calculate the value of her stock and store fixtures. By afternoon, they had contacted a merchant from the next town over who agreed to purchase everything for a fair price, pending proper transfer of the deed. "You do not have to do this," Matthew said quietly as they stood in her living quarters that evening, most of her personal belongings now packed into trunks. "If you want to stay and fight for your place here, my brothers and I will support you in that too." Olivia looked around the rooms that had been her home for 3 months, her symbol of independence and freedom, but they no longer felt safe. Vernon had poisoned this place for her, and she knew that fear would never fully leave as long as she stayed. "I want to go," she said, turning to face him. "Not because I am running away, but because there is nothing holding me here anymore. You said Wyoming is beautiful. I would like to see it for myself." Something warm flickered in Matthew's eyes. "You will not regret it. I will make sure of that." 3 days later, with all her affairs settled and her belongings loaded into a wagon, Olivia Harper left North Platte behind. She sat on the wagon seat beside Matthew as he drove, his brothers riding alongside on horseback. She did not look back as the town disappeared behind them. The journey to Wyoming took 2 weeks, and Olivia used that time to learn more about the Steele brothers and their ranch. Lucas was 28, the eldest, serious and steady with a dry sense of humor that emerged at unexpected moments. Thomas was 23, the youngest, quick to laugh and endlessly optimistic. And Matthew, at 26, was the middle brother, the one who naturally took charge and whom the others looked to for decisions. They were remarkably easy to travel with, treating her with respect and including her in all their decisions about the route and camping. She learned that they had lost their mother young and their father more recently, which had bonded them tightly together. The ranch was their shared dream, something they were building as a family. Olivia found herself drawn to Matthew in ways that both excited and frightened her. He was attentive without being overbearing, strong without being intimidating. He made her laugh with stories of ranch life, and he listened intently when she spoke about her dreams of maybe opening another store someday. She caught him watching her sometimes with an expression that made her heart race, but he maintained a respectful distance, never pushing for more than she was ready to give. On the 10th night of their journey, as they sat around the campfire after dinner, Thomas started telling an embarrassing story about Matthew getting bucked off a particularly ornery horse. Matthew tried to defend himself, which only made Lucas join in with more details. Olivia laughed until tears ran down her face, the sound foreign after so many months of fear. When she finally caught her breath, she found Matthew watching her with soft eyes. "What?" she asked, suddenly self-conscious. "I have never heard you really laugh before," he said quietly. "It is a good sound." The air between them seemed to thicken. Lucas cleared his throat and stood. "Thomas, let us go check on the horses." "But we just checked on them," Thomas protested, earning an elbow in the ribs from his brother. "Oh, right. The horses definitely need checking. Again." They disappeared into the darkness, leaving Olivia alone with Matthew by the fire. She could hear crickets chirping in the grass and the soft sound of the horses moving nearby. The stars overhead were brilliant, more than she had ever seen in Boston or even in North Platte. "Your brothers are not very subtle," she said with a small smile. "No, they are not." Matthew shifted closer to her on the log they shared. "Olivia, I want to tell you something, but I do not want to make you uncomfortable or feel pressured." Her heart started beating faster. "What is it?" He turned to face her fully, his expression serious in the firelight. "When I found you in that cellar, when I saw what had been done to you, something in me just knew. I cannot explain it. I have spent the last 2 weeks trying to convince myself it was just protective instinct, just wanting to help someone in trouble. But it is more than that. Olivia held her breath, afraid to move and break the spell of the moment. I am falling in love with you, Matthew said simply. I know it is fast. I know we barely know each other, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. You are strong and brave and beautiful, and every day I spend with you just makes me more sure. He reached out and took her hand carefully. I am not asking you to feel the same way. I just needed you to know. Whatever you want our relationship to be, I will respect that, but I had to be honest. Olivia felt tears spring to her eyes, but for once they were happy tears. The walls she had built around her heart during the lonely months in North Platte, the barriers that had grown even higher after Vernon's attack, began to crumble. Matthew had shown her kindness when she needed it most. He had protected her without asking anything in return. He had given her a future when she thought she had none. I think I am falling in love with you too, she whispered. It terrifies me. After everything with Vernon, the thought of trusting a man again, of letting someone close, it scares me. But when I am with you, I feel safe. I feel seen. You make me want to be brave enough to try. Matthew's face lit up with a smile that made him look almost boyish. He raised her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles gently. I will spend every day proving that your trust is not misplaced. I promise you that. He leaned forward slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away, but she did not want to. When his lips met hers, it was gentle and sweet, a question more than a demand. She kissed him back, letting herself feel the warmth and connection she had denied herself for so long. When they finally parted, she rested her forehead against his, both of them smiling. Well, it is about damn time, Lucas called from somewhere in the darkness. We have been waiting over here for 10 minutes wondering when you two would finally get to it. Shut up, Lucas, Matthew called back, though he was grinning. Olivia laughed and buried her face against his shoulder, feeling lighter than she had in years. They reached the Steele ranch 5 days later, and Olivia's first glimpse of it took her breath away. The house was larger than she expected, a sturdy 2-story structure with a wide porch that wrapped around the front. The land stretched out in all directions, rolling grassland dotted with cattle, with the mountains visible as a purple smudge on the western horizon. Several outbuildings clustered near the main house, including a large barn, a bunkhouse for the ranch hands, and various storage sheds. It is beautiful, Olivia breathed as Matthew helped her down from the wagon. Wait until you see the sunset from the porch, Thomas said eagerly. It turns the whole sky pink and gold. The ranch hands came out to greet them, a mix of young and old cowboys who clearly respected the Steele brothers. Matthew introduced Olivia simply as a friend who would be staying with them, and if anyone thought it was odd for an unmarried woman to be living at the ranch, they kept it to themselves. The inside of the house was masculine but comfortable, with sturdy furniture and a large stone fireplace dominating the main room. Lucas showed her to a bedroom upstairs that had belonged to their mother, a sunny room with windows overlooking the front pasture. We have kept it closed since she died, Lucas said quietly, but we cleaned it out when we knew you were coming. We thought you might like it. Olivia touched the quilt on the bed, clearly handmade, and felt honored to be given such a meaningful space. Thank you. It is perfect. Over the next few weeks, Olivia settled into ranch life. She was not content to be idle, so she took over managing the household, which had been neglected since the brothers' mother died. She organized the kitchen, planned meals, and even started a vegetable garden behind the house. The ranch hands were initially wary of her, but her cooking and genuine interest in their lives won them over quickly. She also started planning for a new store. The nearest town was 6 miles away, a growing community called Silver Creek that could use a well-stocked general store. Matthew rode with her to look at available properties, and they found a perfect location on the main street. With the money from selling her North Platte store and some investment from the Steele brothers, she began making plans to open for business by fall. But more than the work or the beautiful land, it was her growing relationship with Matthew that made Wyoming feel like home. They spent evenings on the porch watching those stunning sunsets Thomas had promised, talking about everything and nothing. He taught her to ride better, taking her on long trips around the ranch where they could be alone. She taught him about literature and music, reading aloud to him in the evenings while he repaired tack or cleaned his guns. The physical attraction between them grew stronger as the weeks passed, stolen kisses becoming longer and more passionate. But Matthew never pushed for more, respecting the boundaries she set even when she could see the desire in his eyes. 2 months after arriving in Wyoming, on a warm August evening, Matthew asked Olivia to take a ride with him. He led her to a spot on the far edge of the ranch where a creek cut through the property, creating a small pool surrounded by cottonwood trees. The sun was just beginning to set, painting the water gold. "This was my mother's favorite spot," Matthew said as he helped her dismount. "She used to come here when she needed peace. After she died, I started coming here to feel close to her." He took her hand and led her to a flat rock beside the water. They sat together, and Olivia leaned against his shoulder, content in the comfortable silence they had developed. "I have something to ask you," Matthew said after a while. He shifted so he could look at her, his expression nervous in a way she had never seen before. "I have been thinking about this since about the 3rd day of our journey from Nebraska. I have tried to be patient, to give you time to heal and feel safe. But Olivia, I cannot wait any more." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. When he opened it, Olivia gasped. Inside was a simple gold band with a small diamond, delicate and beautiful. "This was my mother's ring," Matthew said softly. "My father gave it to her when they married. I want you to have it if you will accept it. Olivia Harper, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life protecting you, loving you, building a future with you?" Tears streamed down Olivia's face, but she was smiling so hard her cheeks hurt. "Yes," she said. "Yes, absolutely yes." Matthew whooped with joy and swept her up in his arms, spinning her around before setting her down to kiss her thoroughly. When they finally parted, both breathless and laughing, he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "We should probably go tell your brothers," Olivia said, though she made no move to leave the circle of his arms. "They already know I was going to ask. Lucas helped me polish the ring, and Thomas threatened to propose to you himself if I did not hurry up." Matthew grinned. "They will wait a little longer." He kissed her again, and Olivia let herself fall completely into the feeling, no longer holding any part of herself back. She was safe. She was loved. She was home. They were married 6 weeks later in Silver Creek, in a small church filled with their friends from the ranch and the growing community. Olivia wore a simple white dress she had sewn herself, with wildflowers in her hair. Matthew could not stop smiling the entire ceremony, and when the minister pronounced them husband and wife, he kissed her with such enthusiasm that everyone laughed. The celebration afterward was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food prepared by seemingly everyone in 2 counties. There was music and dancing, with Matthew refusing to let anyone else dance with his bride more than once. As the sun set in that spectacular Wyoming sky, he swept her into a waltz, holding her close as they moved together. "Happy," he murmured against her hair. "Happier than I ever imagined being," Olivia answered honestly. "When I was trapped in that cellar, I never thought I would feel safe again." I certainly never thought I would find love. You gave me both. You saved me too, Matthew said seriously. I have been going through the motions since my father died, working hard but not really living. You made me remember what it feels like to have something to look forward to, someone to build a future with. That night, after the guests had gone home and the ranch had quieted, Matthew carried Olivia over the threshold of their bedroom, the one that had been his mother's and was now theirs to share. He set her down carefully, his hands trembling slightly as he reached up to remove the pins from her hair, letting it fall in waves around her shoulders. "You are so beautiful," he said softly. "I still cannot believe you are really mine." "I am yours," Olivia confirmed, reaching up to touch his face. "And you are mine, forever." Their wedding night was tender and passionate, Matthew patient and gentle with her inexperience, showing her pleasure she had not known existed. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the moonlight streaming through the windows, Olivia felt a peace settle over her that she had never known. This was what love was supposed to be. This was what partnership meant. Not possession or control, but mutual respect and care. The months that followed were busy and joyful. Olivia's store opened in Silver Creek and became immediately popular, her business sense and friendly manner drawing customers from miles around. Matthew was incredibly supportive, helping her with heavy lifting and deliveries while still managing his ranch duties. They developed a rhythm to their life together, working hard during the day and cherishing their evenings together. Lucas met a schoolteacher named Sarah that fall and began his own courtship, bringing her to family dinners where Olivia immediately liked her kind nature and quick wit. Thomas, meanwhile, declared he was too young to settle down, and kept them all entertained with tales of his various romantic misadventures in Silver Creek. As winter approached, Olivia realized her monthly courses were late. She waited another week to be sure, then rode into town to see the doctor, the same one who had delivered half the children in the county. He confirmed what she already suspected in her heart. She was pregnant. Olivia told Matthew that evening in their bedroom. He had been pulling off his boots after a long day moving cattle to winter pastures, and when she quietly said she had news, he looked up with casual interest. When she told him about the baby, his entire face transformed with wonder and joy. He was across the room in 2 strides, pulling her into his arms and holding her as though she were made of glass. "A baby," he kept repeating. "We are going to have a baby. Are you happy?" Olivia asked, though she could see the answer in his face. "Happy does not begin to cover it," Matthew said fervently. He dropped to his knees and pressed his face against her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. This is your father. I promise to love you and protect you every day of your life." Olivia ran her fingers through his hair, tears of happiness streaming down her face. After everything she had been through, all the darkness and fear, she had found this brilliant, perfect light. The pregnancy progressed smoothly, though Olivia stubbornly insisted on working at the store until she was 7 months along. Matthew fretted constantly, driving her slightly crazy with his attentiveness, but she loved him for it. Lucas and Thomas were equally excited about becoming uncles, already arguing about whose name the baby should carry as a middle name. On a warm spring evening in April of 1879, their son was born. The labor was long and difficult, leaving Matthew pacing frantically downstairs while the doctor and 2 neighboring women attended Olivia. But when he was finally allowed upstairs and saw his wife holding their baby, everything else faded away. "He is perfect," Matthew breathed, touching one tiny fist reverently. "Olivia, he is perfect." "What should we name him?" Olivia asked, exhausted but glowing with happiness. They had discussed names for months without agreeing on anything. But looking at their son's tiny face, Matthew knew immediately. Jesse, after my father, Jesse William Steele. Olivia smiled and nodded. Jesse William, I love it. Jesse was a happy baby who quickly became the center of the ranch's universe. The Cowboys competed to make him smile, and Lucas and Thomas proved to be devoted uncles who spoiled him outrageously. Matthew was a natural father, patient and loving, often found talking to Jesse about the ranch and horses as though the infant could understand every word. Olivia had never been happier. Her store thrived, her marriage was strong, and her son was healthy. She had built the life she always wanted, far beyond what she had imagined that terrible day trapped in the dark cellar in North Platte. When Jesse was 6 months old, a letter arrived addressed to Olivia. The return address was North Platte, and her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. It was from Mrs. Brennan, the woman who had been in her store the day Matthew carried her in. The letter explained that Vernon Cutler was dead. He had gotten drunk a few months earlier and assaulted a young woman passing through town with her family. Her father and brothers had beaten Vernon badly, and he had died from his injuries. Sheriff Paulson had ruled it self-defense. Mrs. Brennan wanted Olivia to know that justice, in its own way, had finally found Vernon. Olivia sat holding the letter for a long time, processing the news. She felt no joy in Vernon's death, but she did feel a final sense of closure. That chapter of her life was truly over. She showed the letter to Matthew that evening, and he read it silently before pulling her into his arms. "How do you feel?" he asked carefully. "Relief," Olivia said honestly, "and gratitude. If he had not done what he did, if you had not found me, none of this would have happened. I would not have you or Jesse or this life. I would not wish what he did to me on anyone, but I cannot regret where it led me." Matthew kissed the top of her head. "Everything you have built, everything we have together, you would have found a way to create. You are too strong and determined not to. But I am grateful every day that I was the one who got to help you, that I was the one who got to love you." 2 years later, Olivia gave birth to their second child, a daughter they named Elena Rose. She had Olivia's blonde hair and Matthew's brown eyes, and she was as spirited as her older brother was calm. Jesse adored his little sister, appointing himself her protector from the moment he saw her. The store expanded, and Olivia hired help so she could spend more time with her children. Matthew and his brothers continued to grow the ranch, eventually expanding their herd to 2,000 head. Thomas finally settled down with a rancher's daughter from the next county, and Lucas and Sarah had 3 children of their own. The Steele family became a fixture in Silver Creek, known for their generosity and strong community ties. Olivia never forgot where she came from or what she had survived, and she made a point of helping other women who found themselves in difficult situations. More than one young woman running from an unwanted situation found temporary shelter at the Steele Ranch and help establishing herself independently. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Matthew took Olivia back to the creek where he had proposed. Their children were being watched by their doting uncles, giving them a rare evening alone. They sat on the same rock, older now but no less in love. "Do you ever think about how different your life would be if things had gone differently?" Matthew asked, holding her hand. "If someone else had found you, if you had decided to stay in North Platte?" "Sometimes," Olivia admitted, "but I try not to dwell on it. I believe things happened exactly as they were meant to. I was supposed to meet you. We were supposed to build this life together." "I still remember the moment I saw you in that cellar," Matthew said softly. "You looked so small and fragile, but when I carried you out into the light, you held on with such strength. I knew then you were special." "You saved my life that day," Olivia said, "in more ways than one." "We saved each other," Matthew corrected, pulling her close. And I would do it all again in a heartbeat. As they watched the sun set over their land, painting the sky in those familiar shades of pink and gold, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The fear and darkness of those 3 days locked underground had seemed like the end of everything, but it had actually been a beginning. The darkness had led her to light. The fear had led her to love. The ending had been a beginning. 3 more children followed Alina, 2 boys and another girl, filling the ranch house with noise and laughter. Jesse grew into a fine young man who shared his father's sense of responsibility and his mother's business sense. Alina was fierce and independent, declaring at age 10 that she was going to be a doctor, something unheard of for a woman but which her parents fully supported. As the years passed, Matthew's hair began to show silver at the temples, and laugh lines appeared around Olivia's eyes. They faced the challenges that came with running a ranch and raising a family, some years harder than others, but they faced them together. Their love, forged in crisis and tempered through years of partnership, only grew stronger. On a summer evening when Olivia was 45, she sat on their porch with Matthew, watching their grandchildren play in the yard. Jesse had married a lovely woman named Catherine, and they had given them 2 beautiful granddaughters. Alina was away at medical school in Boston, writing regular letters about her studies. Their other children were scattered between the ranch, Olivia's store, and various pursuits, but they all came together regularly for Sunday dinners that filled the house with chaos and love. "Did you ever imagine this?" Matthew asked, gesturing to the scene before them. "When you were starting out in North Platte, alone and determined to make your own way?" "No," Olivia said honestly. "I imagined independence and security. I never let myself imagine love like this, a family like this. It seemed too much to hope for." "You deserve every bit of it," Matthew said firmly. He took her hand, his thumb tracing over her knuckles the way he had done countless times over the years. "You are the strongest person I know, Olivia. You took the worst thing that ever happened to you and turned it into this beautiful life. I am in awe of you every single day." Olivia leaned her head on his shoulder, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. "We built this together, all of it. You showed me what real love looks like, what real partnership means. You gave me the courage to trust again." "I just opened the door," Matthew said softly. "You were the one brave enough to walk through it." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell and the stars emerged, those same brilliant Wyoming stars that had witnessed their first kiss all those years ago. Inside the house, they could hear their children preparing dinner, arguing good-naturedly about something trivial. Their grandchildren's laughter rang out from the yard. This was what healing looked like, Olivia thought. This was what it meant to survive and then thrive. Those 3 days in the darkness had been real, and the fear and pain had been real. But so was this. So was the love that surrounded her, the family she had built, the life she had created from ashes. When she was trapped in that root cellar, she had thought her story was ending. She had been wrong. It was just beginning. And what a beautiful story it had turned out to be. Years continued to pass in the way of all good lives, with seasons of joy and seasons of sorrow woven together. They buried Lucas after a heart attack took him at 62, and Olivia held Sarah as she wept, remembering her own fear of loss. Thomas lived to be 84, ornery and full of stories until the very end. Their children grew and had children of their own, spreading the Steele name across Wyoming and beyond. Alina did become a doctor, one of the first women to practice medicine in the state, and she opened a clinic in Silver Creek that bore her mother's maiden name, the Harper Women's Health Clinic. She never married, declaring her patients were her family, but she was beloved by everyone who knew her. Jesse took over the ranch with the same steady dedication his father had shown, expanding it even further while remaining devoted to his family. He often told his children the story of how their grandfather had saved their grandmother, teaching them that real strength meant protecting those who needed it, and that real love meant standing up for what was right. Olivia continued running her store until she was 70, finally passing it to her youngest daughter, who had inherited her mother's business acumen. Even in retirement, she was a fixture in Silver Creek, known for her wisdom and her willingness to help anyone in need. Matthew and Olivia celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. The party was held at the ranch, just as their wedding had been, and as Matthew waltzed with his wife under the stars, both of them moving slower but no less gracefully than they had in their youth, Olivia felt the circle complete. 50 years, Matthew said wonderingly. It feels like both forever and no time at all. I would do it all again, Olivia said. Every single day, even the hard ones. Especially the hard ones, Matthew agreed. They made us who we are. He pulled her closer, and they swayed together under the Wyoming sky, surrounded by the legacy of their love. The ranch stretched out around them, prosperous and thriving. Their children and grandchildren filled the night with laughter. The store in town bore Olivia's name. The clinic honored their daughter's dedication to helping others. From 3 days of darkness had come 50 years of light. From fear had come love. From endings had come new beginnings. When Matthew passed peacefully in his sleep at 78, Olivia grieved deeply, but with gratitude for every year they had shared. She lived 3 more years, spending them surrounded by family, telling stories of the Wild West they had lived through, of the ranch they had built, of the cowboy who had broken down a door and held her close when she needed saving. On a warm spring evening, sitting on her beloved porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, Olivia Harper Steele closed her eyes and slipped away quietly, a smile on her weathered face. Her children found her there, peaceful and content, her hand resting over her heart where Matthew's ring still gleamed on her finger after all these years. At her funeral, the church in Silver Creek was packed with people whose lives she had touched. They spoke of her strength, her kindness, her business acumen, and her fierce love for her family. But it was Jesse who told the true story, the one his parents had shared with all their children. He told them about a young woman trapped in darkness, about a cowboy who broke down the door, about love that bloomed in the Wild West and lasted a lifetime. He told them that sometimes salvation comes from unexpected places, that darkness can lead to light, and that the best love stories are the ones built on foundation of respect, trust, and unwavering devotion. My mother taught us that strength is not about never being afraid, Jesse said, his voice carrying across the silent church. It is about being afraid and choosing courage anyway. She taught us that love is not about possession but about partnership. And she taught us that no matter how dark things seem, there is always light waiting if we are brave enough to reach for it. They buried Olivia beside Matthew on a hill overlooking the ranch, under the big Wyoming sky they had both loved. Their children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren stood together, connected by the love story that had started with a broken door and a gentle embrace, that had grown through 50 years of building a life together, and that would continue through all the generations that came after. The Steele Ranch thrived for another 100 years, passed down through the family, each generation adding their own chapter to the story. Olivia's store became a Silver Creek landmark. Eleanor's clinic expanded into a full hospital. And every child born into the Steele family grew up hearing the story of their great-great-grandmother who was locked in a root cellar for 3 days, and the cowboy who broke the door and held her close, and how that moment of darkness and light changed everything that came after. It was a love story worthy of the Wild West, true and enduring, a testament to the power of courage, compassion, and the kind of love that saves us in our darkest moments and sustains us through a lifetime. From tragedy came triumph. From fear came love. From a locked cellar in North Platte, Nebraska came a legacy that would last forever, proving that sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead us exactly where we are meant to be, into the arms of the person who will love us until our very last breath and beyond, into eternity.